Red Dead Redemption 2's biggest weakness is its very linear and almost impossible to deviate from mission structure. For the most part, the core elements of missions, in not just Red Dead but also Grand Theft Auto games, has remained unchanged since 2001 with the release of GTA 3. Go up to a mission giver to receive a certain task, which involves driving/riding from point A to point B, obviously, either kill someone, destroy something, usually a car, or steal a specific item, or again a vehicle, and then either go back to point A from where the mission began, or the mission simply finishes right there on the spot. That's not where the issue lies, however. See, what made the earlier Grand Theft Auto games so beloved and appreciated was the freedom to do whatever you please, whenever you please, and the sky was your limit. Quite literally. Or sometimes even water in certain games. You could decide to obey the law and actually wait patiently for the traffic light to turn green. Go on rampages for hours on end, trying to see how long you can last before the law takes you down. Or just do the missions and other miscellaneous tasks required for the 100% game completion if you so desired. And missions weren't all that different from the free roam. You had a lot of wiggle room and you were allowed to think outside of the box to find the craziest or fastest method to finish a mission. However, as the games have progressed, both visually as well as mechanically wise, implementing things like cover system, weapon wheels, health regen, car and gun customizations, and so on, making the games more immersive but also increasing the fun factor by naturally allowing the player to be able to do more things in-game, also came a change in their mission structure. See, as these newer titles focus much more on telling compelling and believable stories with better written characters and sometimes even making us empathize with them, there was a sort of need to make the missions reflect that. The drives and rides between point A and B were now used to add more dialogue and further expand the story than in previous games, where characters would only mention important lore details during cutscenes. Now when you ride alongside a character in RDR2 for example, dialogue contains details of current events, backstories of characters, subtle hints at their motivations and what their goals are, and many other things similar to that. There's nothing wrong with it, but in RDR2 specifically, these rides can get very tiresome if you're trying to replay the story. And that's because you're almost always forced to follow a very specific path and you're basically unable to deviate from it. Unless you want to get mission failed and start over. But that's only one aspect of the whole problem. Personally, I have around 400 hours poured into this game, but they consist of only 2, maybe 2.5 playthroughs in total, which is quite strange you might say. How can you possibly have spent that much time and only replay the story just one additional time? You might have a similar playtime count, but maybe 2 or even 3 times as many playthroughs depending on how slow your approach to the game is. It's not as if I hate the story or whatever. I think it's Rockstar's best narrative ever in any of their games, thus far at least. My main issue is replaying the missions themselves. I understand the slower pace of the game and I can even appreciate it. It's a different franchise, not GTA with horses and cowboys. Because the story is much better written, it obviously requires a somewhat slower pace. It's not like the gang can just go on a huge robbery spree across the US and jump on the first boat to Tahiti in just a matter of days. The issue isn't the overall slower pace of the game, because missions can be enjoyable and therefore have an increased replaying value while also telling the exact same story without taking too many lore details away. But nearly every single mission follows a very specific set of instructions given by the developer with little to no freedom in your approach. There are a couple of moments where you can get to choose from a multitude of approaches, but that's only when Rockstar wants you to. Other times, you are flat out unable to creatively problem solve any given task, which is frustrating because older games made by Rockstar gave you the opportunity to do things in your desired way. I'm not the first one to point this out, but a good example of a mission that allows you to complete the task at hand however you want is Jury Fury from GTA Vice City. The premise is very simple. You need to intimidate 2 jurors as a favor for the Forellis. Well, not really a favor, you're kind of forced to. So the way to do it is to damage their cars in the hopes they'll keep their mouths shut. Now the way you damage these cars is irrelevant, as the game only suggests the use of a hammer that is very conveniently available to you from the start. But it's not a requirement, it only hints at it. If you want, you could use guns, grenades, you could just punch and kick it, come in a tank and just collide with it, try your best to flip it over, or even just push it all the way into the water if that's what you want. Not sure why you would do it, but you can try. It doesn't work, but the option to test your method is there, and that's what made these games so amazing. Not to mention when you have to kill a certain character that's on foot. People have come up with dozens, and I mean dozens of ways to eliminate your target, which really emphasizes the whole sandbox aspect of these games. Obviously, there needs to be some level of linearity, or else going off script too much would make the story nonsensical, and I get that as well, but RDR2 does feature a lot of sandboxy freedom, not just in the open world, but you can also eliminate anyone in dozens of ways, like putting them on train tracks or delivering them to the nearest swamp. A great example of freedom during missions are homestead robberies, specifically those where you bring someone along, like the one with Javier that's playing in the background. Or even better than that, bounty hunting missions, where most targets need to be brought either dead or alive, which opens up the doors for a multitude of approaches when you're doing these side quests. While doing this homestead robbery with Javier, the game does kind of suggest a quiet approach, indicating places to hide and sneak around so as to complete the robbery in a stealthy manner. But if you go ahead and ignore all of that and just start blasting, the game surprisingly doesn't mission fail you, which is amazing, because even though I can appreciate and love going on a sneakier approach for the most part, I also prefer the guns blazing method as an alternative, especially if I want to test a new gun. And bounty missions are even better, because from the get-go you're allowed to complete most of them in two branching ways, killing the target or try your best to bring them alive and listen to their dialogue on the ride back to the sheriff's office. Like I've mentioned earlier, there's about 100 ways you could go about eliminating a target, so a whole bunch of doors are open to you. But even if you decide to bring them alive, there's more than one way in which you can execute the task, and that's amazing. It's the essence of the earlier GTAs that is in these side missions, which I believe we could see more in future titles, and I am basically begging Rockstar to go down on that route. Because I think there needs to be a balance between the thrilling and creative ways of completing certain tasks during missions, while also telling the same deep and rich stories that have become the norm in the newer games. A lot of people, including myself of course, have expectations set quite high for a game like GTA 6, with people being excited for new features like an advanced system for breaking into cars, similar to GTA Chinatown Wars, an overhauled weapon and inventory system, as well as improved gunplay, which I could not be more happy about. Or wishing other mechanics, like assets and management missions from Vice City or Empire Buildings 2 from Vice City Stories, could potentially have a return in this game too. Personally, if I could ensure that one thing can make it 100% into this game, it would definitely be an improved mission structure. I'm not asking for crazy and never before seen mechanics, only a reasonable amount of that 2000s era freedom and player choice that we had. I'm sure that GTA 6 will have the best written story and maybe even best characters we've seen so far in this franchise, even if people think that the departure from Rockstar of important OGs like Dan Houser and Laszlo could result in the opposite happening. They will try to go all out, especially considering that a romance dynamic between two protagonists is going to appear for the first time ever. Of course, romance has been touched upon in the earlier GTAs, but not quite to the extent that we're expected to see in this game. But with that, there's the possibility for the game to feature a more restrictive approach to missions, just like Red Dead Redemption 2, where the missions will absolutely be thrilling and amazing, but because they lack the ability to think outside of the box and allow for unique ways of completing them, it takes away a lot of replaying value from the story mode, but not the game itself. As a summary, I 100% love Red Dead, and all of this yapping that I'm doing is coming from a place of love and appreciation for the game. I hope that is very clear. However, I do think that the game could have had even more replaying value than it has, and the way to fix it for not only GTA 6, but any other title that is similar and could come in the very near future, should simply allow more of that sandboxy freedom in the missions as well. But what do you think? Do you prefer the more scripted and linear approach to missions like how it is in Red Dead Redemption 2? Or do you prefer the older style from the earlier GTAs that had more of that freedom of choice and allowed for creative ways to complete them? Again, I think there's a way for Rockstar to give us the best of both worlds, and if it's anyone that can nail that balancing of the two, it's definitely them. So let me know in the comment section down below. And while you're there, also leave a like. And of course, consider subscribing if you want to see more. Thank you so much for watching.